was to kill his family members, start a diversionary fire in rural Waseca to distract first responders, and travel to the Waseca Junior-Senior High School.
What is becoming a far too common scene. Another school plot here coming to light on American soil. Minnesota authorities saying they foiled that plot, what could have been one that could have wiped out an entire high school. Police say a 17-year-old, John Ledoux, he's in juvenile detention after they recovered explosives, guns, ammunition, and so much more from a storage facility that he was renting. And for more, we are joined now via Skype by security consultant Sal Lafreri. Sal served as the Director of Security and Intelligence Operations for Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management. He also served as a member of the elite NYPD hostage negotiation team for 12 years. Sal, thank you so much for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
You know, we see the case out of Minnesota, and it's the latest example. And as we said here, it's starting to have less rhyme and reason. There's no limit. It's in rural, it's in suburban, it's in urban schools. We saw the spate of stabbings even. Is there a sense when you talk and you hear from the superintendents that, sure, they can put in, make it tougher for somebody to get into the building, but after that, there doesn't seem to be really any safeguard they can have. They have any predictor of what's going to happen next. If not a sense of helplessness, it just seems that it's coming from all directions.
Security isn't something that you stop right then and there and you stop the attack. This is something that happens over a prolonged period of time. I mean, we need to get much better in getting 2020 foresight as compared to the 2020 hindsight that we all have.
If you look at this historically, when we do the post-mortem on these, does it usually turn out that other kids knew that the kid wasn't in a good place, or even had talked openly of doing this? Are there usually telltale signs that go ignored, and then we learn too late?
Traditionally, yes, that's what we've been seeing, and it carries over not just with the children, but even with the adults. That there were signs, things that should have been traditional red flags that we should have reacted to, that we're not reacting to that quickly. Sometimes it's difficult, especially with teenagers. Some of the behaviors that are associated that they would have is stuff that is of a traditional teenager, the moodiness, the sometimes being withdrawn, sometimes not wanting to be with friends. And so some of the different, highs and lows that they have that's just being a traditional teenager is sometimes becomes indicators that something is potentially wrong.
Well, to that end, Sal, in terms of preventative measures, a superintendent comes to you, and hopefully you're not going to tell them, like I've seen in some states, let's have the lunch lady or the custodian packing heat here when they go to school. What should schools do that maybe they're not doing right now that would make a material difference?
Number one, you need to get better channels of communication and try and really narrow down, what are those red flag issues. You need better communications with the students. Most times, and most of the things that we're saying in the debriefs is that the students knew it, or the family knew it, or the community knew it. So you need to be able to have them recognize, when things are just starting to go slightly awry, put an early warning system in place. And then, as we're starting to see now, schools taking much more serious approaches to putting plans in place to be able to deal with those situations when they unfortunately do occur.
Sal, we've learned, at least from the manifesto, if you want to call this, to the kid in Minnesota, that he was trying to target this on an anniversary of the Columbine incident. And we've seen a lot of copycat nature to this, maybe for some of the attention attached. But the recent stabbings that we saw in both Pennsylvania and in Connecticut, in some ways that's as troubling, because the kid has to go to an effort to get the gun. But anybody can go in the kitchen and grab a knife. What was your take on what we've seen here in the last couple of weeks with the stabbings?
I had a slightly different take on it, and that was, when you're talking about shooting someone, and as cold and heartless as this sounds, it's relatively easy to take a gun and shoot someone because you're not violating intimate personal space. With a knife, you really have to have a sense of rage. You really have to be willing to violate that person's personal space, and you have to be able to do an incredibly vicious act. And I was sort of concerned with that. And the question that I've always been kicking around since then was the use of a knife because they weren't able to get their hands on a gun, or was this something that they actually had given thought to, that they wanted, to have a much more significant, a much more vicious way of doing it? And that's something that once the forensics of this comes out, and with when they do the forensics examinations on the entire situation and issue a final report, that's something that we're going to be looking for.
Hey, Sal, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Coming up next, everyone, higher education inside prisons, using taxpayer dollars for it. Well, it got Governor Cuomo in some hot water earlier this year, but there is a lot you might not know about those programs and the benefits they bring, not just to the inmates, but to society in general. We're going to go inside the Hudson Link Prison Education Program coming up next.